Let's take a look at another example. I'd like to find the equation for the graph below. So notice when I look at this particular graph, here's the y-axis and find the x-axis. So let's follow our 4 steps. First, I'm going to locate the midline. I notice the maximum here is at 7 and the minimum is at 1. The midline's halfway between these two, so the midline is at y equals 4. So that k, that plus number at the very end, is going to be plus 4. Next, determine whether sine or cosine is the better fit. Well, notice where the y-intercept is here. The y-intercept is at the minimum, and as we said before, we use cosine if the y-intercept is at the minimum or at the maximum. Since it's the minimum, we use the cosine function. Now, we'll have to be a little bit careful because remember what our cosine function typically looks like. Remember our regular cosine function intersects the y-axis at its maximum. This one intersects the y-axis at its minimum. That we're going to address here in step number 3. So step 3, we determine the amplitude. And remember we said the maximum was 7, and we said that the midline's 4, so the amplitude has to be 3. Right? So that's, and again, that's because the midline was 4, and then our distance to the maximum was 3 units. Now notice the graph looks like a cosine function reflected. It looks like one turned upside down. So it resembles minus cosine x in its shape. And so instead of using a 3 in front of the cosine function, we're going to use a negative 3 because of that reflected view. And then lastly, we determine the period from the graph, and from that we get our b. If I scroll back up and look at the period, look at the graph, I'll notice that it looks like it does one complete cycle in 6 units. And so if I come back down, I said the period is 6, so b is 2 pi over 6 or pi over 3. And now if we put all of that into a single statement, I end up getting y equals, there's the negative 3 that was from step 3, determined it was the cosine function. There's our b, we found pi over 3. Once again, don't forget the x. And then our shift up 4, our plus 4 from the midline. You'll want to make sure you go into the book and you do lots of practice because these are very, very important questions. This is one of the questions that you tend in a pre-calculus class to see people ask more of, give you a graph or give you a situation, have you draw a graph, and then from there obtain the equation. So this is something you'll want to pay particular attention to.